What if the maturity that everyone admired in you as a child was actually a wound wearing a costume? Most people celebrate the responsible kid, the one who never caused trouble, who took care of others, who always seemed older than their years. But psychology tells a very different story about what was really happening beneath that composure. Psychology and neuroscience reveal that children who grow up too fast don't just develop early, they develop differently. In this video, you'll discover the lasting psychological patterns left behind by a childhood that asked too much, too soon. Some of these will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about your own behavior. And stay till the end. The final insight is the one most people spend a lifetime never understanding about themselves. There's a particular kind of person who always notices when the energy in a room shifts. They sense tension before anyone speaks. They read faces the way others read text messages, constantly, automatically, looking for clues about what's coming next. Psychology calls this hypervigilance, and research shows it often develops in children who grew up in unpredictable environments. When a home felt emotionally unsafe, or when a parent's mood dictated the atmosphere, a child's brain adapted by becoming an expert threat detector. Here's what's fascinating. This wasn't weakness, it was intelligence applied to survival. If you find yourself always reading the room, your nervous system learned something most people never had to. The cost came later. The skill, though, is real. Next, something that looks like a personality trait but is actually a coping strategy. Ask someone who grew up too fast for help and watch what happens. There's often a pause, a flicker of discomfort, followed by "No, I've got it." Not because they don't need help, but because needing help was never safe. Research on parentified children, kids who took on adult emotional or practical responsibilities, shows they frequently develop what psychologists call compulsive self-reliance. The brain wired around one core belief, depending on others, leads to disappointment. If asking for help feels almost physically uncomfortable, that's not stubbornness. That's a nervous system that once learned to survive alone. The good news: neural pathways that were learned can, with time and awareness, be rewired. But here's something deeper. What this does to relationships. Children who grew up too fast often carry a quiet, persistent sense that their own needs are inconvenient, too much, not worth the trouble. Studies on childhood emotional neglect show that when a child's emotional needs go consistently unmet, especially when they're busy managing everyone else's emotional world, those needs don't disappear. They go underground, and they get replaced with guilt. This shows up in adulthood as over-apologizing, shrinking, feeling selfish for wanting basic things like rest, attention, or support. If you relate to this, psychology is clear: the guilt isn't yours. It was assigned to you before you were old enough to refuse it. Here's something that surprises most people who grew up too fast. They can handle a genuine crisis with remarkable steadiness. Death, chaos, emergency, they're steady. Then a small inconvenience, a social rejection, a minor failure can feel completely destabilizing. This isn't inconsistency, it's a developmental gap. Psychology research shows that when children are forced into adult emotional roles, they develop sophisticated coping for big external stresses, but often miss out on the emotional scaffolding that helps regulate ordinary, everyday distress. The result: a person who handles hard things well but sometimes can't explain why small things hit so hard. That's not a flaw. That's a blueprint left incomplete. We're not done. And the next sign is one that most people mistake for a personality trait their whole lives. Rest for someone who grew up too fast can feel genuinely unsafe. Not boring. Unsafe. Neuroscience helps explain why. When productivity and caretaking were how a child earned love or maintained peace in the home, the brain formed a deep association. Being useful equals being okay. Being idle equals being in danger. Research on early chronic stress shows this can suppress the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for daydreaming, play, and genuine rest. Adults who grew up this way often describe being unable to just relax without guilt, or a compulsive need to be doing something. Stillness wasn't safe then. Teaching the body it's safe now is some of the most important work these individuals can do. At some point, sometimes in their 20s, sometimes later, many people who grew up too fast encounter a strange, sourceless sadness. They can't always name it. Life may be going well by every measure, and yet something feels missed. Psychologists recognize this as developmental grief. It's the mourning of a childhood that was given away or taken before it could be fully lived. The loss isn't dramatic. There may have been no single traumatic event, but there was a slow, steady cost. Research shows acknowledging this grief, rather than dismissing it as self-pity, is actually one of the most psychologically healthy things these individuals can do. The sadness isn't weakness. It's the psyche finally having enough safety to feel what it couldn't feel then and now. The final insight, the one that reframes everything. Here's what the research ultimately reveals about people who grew up too fast. The same experiences that cost them their ease, their rest, their sense of permission to need things. Those same experiences built something extraordinary. Studies on post-traumatic growth and emotional intelligence consistently show that individuals who navigated complex emotional environments early in life develop profound empathy, nuanced perception, and a depth of understanding that others often spend decades trying to cultivate. They feel deeply. They notice what others miss. They carry people with a tenderness that comes from knowing what it is to carry weight. That isn't coincidence. That's the shape that resilience takes when it grows inside a child who had no other choice. The depth isn't despite the childhood. In so many ways, it is the childhood, transformed. What looks like early maturity from the outside is often a child quietly doing the emotional labor that adults around them couldn't or wouldn't do. And the patterns left behind, the hypervigilance, the self-sufficiency, the guilt around needs, the grief. These aren't personality flaws. They're intelligent adaptations to circumstances that required too much, too soon. If any of this resonated, psychology is clear. Awareness is where change begins. Understanding why these patterns exist is the first step toward choosing something different. These aren't things to be ashamed of. They're things to be understood. And understanding yourself truly, honestly, with compassion is the work that makes the rest possible. If this video helped you see yourself a little more clearly, subscribe for weekly psychology insights on human behavior, emotional intelligence, and the patterns that quietly shape who we become. The next video explores something closely connected and equally overlooked. You'll want to see it.